a lot has been pulled out of the infrastructure bill. We've listened to people like Jamal Bowman talk about the issues with it. So I think the necessary follow-up question is, with all that's been taken out, are you still going to support it? And thankfully, Jamal Bowman was asked about this. So here's his response.
You think if that's out, are you in?
That remains to be determined. We're the only developed country in the world that does not have paid family leave. We were supposed to be at 12 weeks. It went down to 4 weeks, and now it's out. Even though the majority of the country supports paid family leave. It's archaic, it's inhumane to ask a mom or new parents to leave their child in childcare while they have to go back to work to try to earn a living and keep a roof over their heads. So it remains to be determined where I am now that I'm hearing that that is out. Again, it's unfortunate that we have a minority senator, one person who opposes this where the majority of the country supports it. So for me, it's unacceptable.
So he says it's unacceptable. He was asked a couple times, so will you vote for it? And he does say that remains to be seen, which, I like Jamal Bowman. I've talked with Jamal Bowman. I don't like the answer remains to be seen. Everything conceivable in the universe remains to be seen. I would like a bit more specificity. But we do know Bernie Sanders, who if he votes against it, the entire thing is dead, like literally just him. He says if we fail, in my view, if the American people do not believe that government can work for them and is dominated by powerful special interests, the very fabric of American democracy is in danger. People will no longer have faith that their government represents them. That's what this issue is about. And by the way, I would add on, and they would be 100% right, because it is clear that a critical mass of senators have no interest whatsoever in representation. Rashida Tlaib says, I'm not gonna sell out my district for a bill that was written by the fossil fuel industry and championed by 2 Dem senators who bow down to big pharma and corporate polluters. I know Pramila Jayapal has been pressured about this, hasn't been totally clear about what's gonna happen, but it would only take a couple of progressives to tank this. So the question is, will they? Another question is, should they? Trae, what do you think about this? Where do you see this going?
Ultimately, wherever the moneyed interest want it to go, probably, unfortunately, because it's like Bernie and you were just saying, and Tlaib was pointing out, that's really how it works at the end of the day. And again, just the transparency of it, the bald audacity of how upfront they are with the influences that really operate on them is what upsets me the most about it. Brief anecdote: I was a correspondent on this news magazine pilot that didn't become a show, and I went to my home state of Tennessee and covered this medical marijuana legislation that was about to happen there, and of course it ultimately failed. And I was talking to the 2 guys that authored it, and they were conservatives, state level conservatives in Tennessee, who authored this medical marijuana bill. And I asked them, among your constituents, how much pushback do you see for this? And they were like, oh, almost none. And these are people with rural counties and stuff. They're like, really, no one is opposed to this at all. And I said, and what do you think the odds are of it passing? And they said, oh, it's a coin flip at best. It probably won't. And I said, well, how is that possible? How do you explain that? And they're like, well, some of our colleagues in the state Congress, some of their interest groups just haven't been convinced yet, And I was like, what? Why does that? Who cares, But they just openly will admit that it was like the private industry, the private prisons and law enforcement, were the interests who were just gonna determine whether that happened or not. And they would just and they acting like I'm stupid for being upset about it. They were like, that's how things work, Trae. That's just the way it is. And that is just the way it is, and it makes me furious, and it's very, again, discouraging and upsetting, but that's just where we're at. That's why I think the number one thing ultimately, and I don't know how we do it considering the way that everything works right now, is to get the money out of American politics as much as possible, because that's the whole and entire reason that we're even talking about any of this right now, is because of them. So yeah, again, if you can't tell, I'm not super hopeful right now, but I'd like to see things, get better and clean up, but we'll see.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And there really are like there's different levels of, I don't know if ignorance is the right word, but like it's one level to not understand the way that things are. It's another level to understand and not be bothered anymore by the way things are.
Yeah.
And to like not use the platform you have if you're in the media to make it clear. And we're gonna have an example of that in just a little bit with a tweet from Casey Hunt. Like, I get that this is how it is. I also think it shouldn't be the way that it is, and we can do something socially in terms of media to stop that. And yeah, look, they can vote against it. They could also threaten to vote against it, and I would say could have been doing that more along the way. But I will also remind people that what I've been saying from the very beginning in this is you have these two bills and you have the quote unquote moderates, I hate that term, who like one and don't like the other. You have progressives who like the other one, but not the first one. And in theory, either side could tank the entire thing, but that has never, ever been an even playing field because the progressives really want the one to be good and are willing to accept the other. The so-called moderates are perfectly fine with the government literally never doing anything ever. Manchin Cinema are not gonna bawl themselves to sleep if the bipartisan one ends up not passing. So that's one of the political handicaps that we've dealt with from the very beginning of this. But I also want, feel free.
The dynamic with the progressive caucus and the moderates and everything and what's going on there. I mean, I want the progressives to continue to hold the line as much as possible because what else are they supposed to do? In my opinion, it feels like their only option. But I mean, having said that, of course, if where that ends up going is that just nothing happens, then that's a victory for the moderates as well because of what you just said. It's so fun. It's always been wild to me how many like Congress people we have on both sides who seem to be totally unaware of the fact that they are ostensibly lawmakers. That is their job, is to do stuff because. Man, they hate doing stuff. Like they'll go out of their way to avoid doing anything. My default assumption is always with any kind of congressional proceedings that the ultimate result of it will be pretty much nothing. So, we'll see what happens. But I mean, they have to keep, like I said, they need to take and maintain a stand for sure. So I don't know how it's going to go.
And by the way, so we have someone started a Twitch poll, should progressives kill the bill? And yes has an unambiguous 100% of the vote, which is fine. And it would send a signal. But one thing, and I'm paraphrasing, he can respond if he thinks that I'm misconstruing what he said. But one disagreement I have with Cenk is that killing it would send a strong signal to the moderates. But again, I would say, will it if they don't care? Like, no, it's not like they'll learn. Yeah. I mean, and by the way,
same way about it.
Yeah, that is a terrible position for us to be in. It's like it's a feeling of powerlessness, and I hate being the one to point out how powerless we can be. But the people who defend the status quo, by their very nature, don't have much that they need because the status quo is working fine for them.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.